Okay, so Shavua Tov, everybody. We're getting out of this Shabbat where we read the Torah portion of Yitro, which has the Ten Commandments. Amazing Parshah, where we can all connect to the core and the essence of Torah as it was given on Mount Sinai. And the first pasuk in chapter 20 of Chumash Shmos, of the Exodus of what we're about to read, starts that God spoke all these words, Vaydaber Elokim et kol hadvarim ha'ele le'emor, to respond or to tell. And the question is asked, who is he trying to tell? Because everyone was there. Every person, every one of us, that we know, every Jewish neshama that ever was and that ever will be, was right there listening in Mount Sinai. We were all listening to the Ten Commandments. So what does it mean when God is speaking in order to say to someone? Normally, this would mean that Moshe Rabbeinu is listening, and now he's going to tell everybody what God told him. But in this case, where we're all listening, why is God saying that he's trying to have these told? What is this lemor, to respond or to say? So there's a very, very nice perush that the Rabbi brings, and Rav Ginsburg explains deeply that there's 10 commandments, but there's also the first 10 that we know about is Asara Ma'amarot, the 10 statements or the 10 sayings that God said in order to create the world. So what is the connection between those two tens, the 10 commandments, which is the basis of Torah, and Asara Ma'amarot, the 10 statements or sayings that God had in the beginning? The connection, as the Rabbi Magid from Ezrich says, the connection is that we want Torah to influence the way we see the world. God is saying the 10 commandments, we are getting the Torah, not just like our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Judah, and all the Beis HaMidrash that they had there for Torah, but the commandments are given, Torah is given on Mount Sinai in order for us to have it in our day-to-day life, in the 10 statements that make the world, in everything that we do when we walk this world. That is the first pasuk, that is the heading, I want to say, the way I see it, of the 10 commandments. That the 10 commandments, and therefore the whole Torah, is given in order for us to be able to live our lives in a different way. Not in the way we would think, but in a new way. So that's the first introduction. We're gonna start learning a little bit of this week's wonders, the wonders niflaot of this parashah. First, we always say that we started this shiur and we're learning together to have very strong health first to our Rav Yitzchak Feibish ben Breina Malka, and to our friend Blum Abad Gilen Ben Tova, my son Levi Avia Ben Ayala. Amongst all the other people, everyone should be very healthy, have a refuah shalema, strong health. And in this week's Torah portion, there's a very famous Rashi that explains that God tells Moses, I'm going to tell you the commandments, and you tell Bnei Israel. And Moses responds right back, no. We, meaning the people, want to see our king. Ratzonenu lirot et malkeinu. We want to see our king. We want to hear it directly from God. We want to be close. So we want to hear Rav Ginsburg in very strong health. We want to hear a shiur. We had, for many years, we had a shiur every week. So we started this shiur in order to make simcha and be able to hear a shiur every week. Bezrat Hashem, we should all be able to have a shiur, whether it's streaming or in person, and both from Rav Ginsburg every week. This week's Torah, this week's wonders from this, the connection to this week's Torah portion has to do with a very special word. The word in Hebrew is hitpashtut. Hitpashtut, what does it mean? So we can already hear various different words, whether it's pshat, which means a simple translation or just simple. Hitpashtut could also mean to strip down or to take things out of something. It also has the word pshita, which means to raid. And it also has the meaning of expansion or to spread, which when I was telling my kids about this year and the subject that we are going to say, when I said the word hishpashtu, they're like, oh, like the coronavirus. so yes, there's what to learn from that too. But that's what this shiur is about. I'll say an introduction. When I was reading this shiur, I remembered something that was very inspirational to me. It actually came, as we say, chokhmah bagoyim. There's wisdom in non-Jews. When I was younger, I was listening to various people. They call them gurus of real estate. They give various different courses and classes about different subjects. And one of the things that really got to me was this guy was saying a statement, which first, when I heard it, I was shocked. But then when I thought about it, I thought that this is a real statement. And the statement was, the less you do, the more you make. Very interesting statement. If we want to explain this, let's take an example. Let's take a big company. Let's talk about Microsoft. If you have Microsoft, who works the hardest? Usually the person that works the hardest laborer in the building is the cleaning person. They work very hard to clean. But unfortunately, they make the least amount. Who makes the most money and who works the least? The boss, the CEO, the manager, or even the owner of the company. The one that does the least amount in the company usually is the one that makes the most amount. What is that? And what is the secret of that? So we'll say the basics of it, but as we dive into this week's wonders, we'll learn the beauty of it from our Torah. But the basics is that in order for you to be able to spread, as we say, to hitpashtut, to spread out, to cover more things, to be able to handle more, you have to strip down of, let's call it in this case, your basic responsibilities. Otherwise, you, in the simple sense, we'll go into the deeper senses, but the simple sense, in order to have time, if you ask the CEO of a company to clean the room, he may be willing to do it, but everyone will scream at you that you're not allowing the company to grow because his time is nailed down, and we'll learn a little bit about nailed and na'alecha, your shoes. We'll see a little bit more about that, but he's nailed down, he's confined to cleaning a room, and therefore he can't grow the company. So that's the thought that I had. It's let's call it a second introduction to this week's shiur from the Wonders. So we'll say a little bit something we spoke about last week and before that, that there's two explanations about the way to look at God, or to look at the relationship between God and the world. First comes from the Rambam Maimonides, and the way he says it is the only way you can think or look or contemplate or learn about God is to strip him down from everything, lishlol, to make him not what you are thinking. So the Rambam, the way Maimonides looks at God, is he says he is not what you're thinking. He's not a person. He does not have a body. He does not have his kindness is not your kindness. The way you think of love is not the way he sees it, etc., etc. That God is different and is not what we are thinking about. And that's the only way you can think of him. Because everything you say about him, anything you want to say, if you say that God is kind, then kindness is something that's related to us, and therefore you're confining him to the way you see kindness. So therefore, Maimonides says, Rambam says, no, you cannot confine God, you cannot call him anything. 150 years later, a little bit more later, Rabbi Chazdai Kirkash, which most people have not heard of him, but Rav Ginsburg said that most of today's Jewish world goes by this opinion, this explanation. He says the opposite. You could say things about God. What could you say? You can say that he's good. You can say good things about God, obviously explaining that there's a difference, but you can still call him these things in order to pray to him, in order to connect to him, but in order to have connection to God. Okay, so that is the, we spoke about it, Rav Ginsburg spoke about it, it was brought down a couple times. There's a book that was written by Rav Ginsburg about this. That's just, for right now, this is the introduction, the third introduction. So going back to this week's Torah portion, we're getting the Torah in Mount Sinai, but the Mefarshim say that Mount Sinai is the same place where Moses was first introduced to Hashem with the fire. Meaning Moses was a shepherd. He was seeing the sheep of Yitro, which is the name of this Torah portion. He was Zocher. He had the merit to have the 10 Commandments in his Parshah. But Moses was watching his sheep, and one of the sheep ran off. And when he was running after him, all of a sudden he saw this wondrous thing. This bush, this thorn bush, was on fire, but something very special. The fire normally, when it touches something, it eats it. The fire that was touching the bush was not eating it. The bush was on fire, but it was not ukal, it was not eaten up, it was not falling apart. It was staying complete. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I got to go see, well, what is this? And he comes to get closer, and then Hashem calls him out and says, stop. Al tikrav halom. Do not come here. Okay, that al is very important. That Moshe, that in general in life, we always have the no before the yes. And this is, again, part of this whole discussion that in order to achieve something, you must first strip it down of the things that you cannot do to achieve it. So in order for Moshe to get close, you have to first stop. And what do you have to do? Al tikrav halom, do not come close. Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha, take your shoes off your feet. Ki hamakom asher ata omed alav, the place that you're going to be standing on, admat kodeshu, is a holy ground. Okay, and that is the introduction to the first nevuah, the first prophecy, that where God tells Moses, go out there and save the Jewish people from Egypt and bring Torah to the world, to the Jewish people and then to the world. So what we're looking at is this introduction. As we said, there was an introduction to the 10 Commandments, now the introduction to the first prophecy. And the introduction is to take your shoes off. What do you have to do? So the Mefarshim explained that this is called hitpashtut gashmiut, to strip down your gashmius, your physical matter, in the sense that Moshe has to put away everything that you're used to, everything that you're confined with, in order to spread. What is going to happen here? God is going to give him the prophecy, and he's going to take it and bring the Jewish people to Mount Sinai, which is the whole idea of getting out of Egypt, was to come to Mount Sinai to receive Torah. And with this prophecy, it's going to spread these 10 commandments to the world. So in order to spread them, you must first get out of your physical way of looking at things. Now, we have to understand that shoes represent something very special. The word na'alecha, your shoes, doesn't necessarily, as Rav Ginsburg points out, it mean shoes that you're wearing on your feet. It could also mean some sort of either gloves or even like a scarf, or where do we see this? We see it in the book of Ruth, that Boaz was negotiating with this person who had the first right to redeem Ruth. And he was telling him, okay, if you're going to give me your rights, you have to take out your shoe and give it to me, and I will hold it, and therefore I will buy your rights to the heritage of Elimelech, the father of the Chassan of Ruth, the first Chassan of Ruth. So what does he do? He does that. He takes out his shoe. Now, the Mefarshim explained that what he meant by a shoe was basically his glove, the shoe, which is why in this pasuk it says Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha, the shoes that cover your feet, and not the shoes that cover your hands. Why is it so important? We have to realize that in the base of Mikdash, the Kohanim would walk around barefoot, but they would, everything in their clothing was very much commanded to them. They didn't have the option of what kind of clothing to wear, but the one thing they were asked is to walk barefoot. Lahavdil, we can see it in other places, that a holy place requires barefoot. What does that represent? The feet represents the way we see things, the way we connect physically to the world in the most basic senses, which is why you have to take out your shoes from your feet, because the way you connect, the shoes in here represents the confinement that we put when connecting to the world, the way we understand the world, but rather direct connection. Now, you don't have to take out the let's call it the shoes of your hand, the gloves, or your upper clothes, because with that you could connect to Hashem. What is that? So that represents more of what the difference between the way Maimonides, the Rambam, looks at it, and Rabbi Chazdai looks at it. The first, you have to take out your shoes, which is the physical way of looking at God, which Rabbi Chazdai agrees. You cannot say that God has hands or feet or body or a basic thought process that we think. No, that is something that everyone agrees you have to disconnect from when thinking about Hashem. But connecting in a higher level, in a level where it's more connected to your glove, which means a higher level of connection is more, the gloves are in the level of your heart. That kind of connection you could have with Hashem. So that is a very nice way, a beautiful way of looking at it, where you're stripping out of your shoes, but you're connecting in a higher level of your heart. Now, again, we said that when we are talking about to strip down, lifshot, the basic thing when we say lifshot, we think about the simple sense of a raid. Lifshot alir. Why do you raid a city? In order to get shalal. Shalal, normally translated as the wealth of the city, is also the same word as shlila, which means strip out, to put away, or to say no to. So again, if you want to raid the city, you first have to look at the shalal. You have to lishlol. If we noticed when Bnei Israel went into the land of Israel, the first commandment with regards to the raid of city, what was the first city? The first city was Jericho. What was the first commandment with regard to that? Is to not take any of the spoils of the city, which we know the famous story where Achan took some of the spoils, but the concept was that in order to be able to connect to the spoils of anything, you must first disconnect yourself from the basic spoils. The same thing that we're saying here, that in order to be, to expand and to, let's call it, to raid the city in the good sense, to accept good things from it, you first have to lishlol, to separate yourself from the basic physicalities, the basic confinements. But if you accept it, shalal also refers to the Hebrew word of shlal gvanim, which means many different types of either different colors or but from being nothing to being something very beautiful and very particular. So if you're able to raid the city properly and disconnect yourself from what you're not supposed to have, you will be able to take spoils, but real spoils that are going to make a beautiful picture, just for the sake of explaining it. So what are we saying again? And this is the whole heading of this shiur in this week's Wonders, is that in order to have expansion, in order to do real good, to spread the good word of Torah and the good prophecy that Moshe Rabbeinu started, you have to first, again, the same word, Hafshada, strip out all of the physical basic confinements and also the physical confinements that confine your way of thinking, in order to achieve a higher sense. Very interestingly, what is the pasuk that is connected to Brit Milah, to the circumcision, to the first mitzvah that is put on a baby? It says, Sas anochi al imratecha. Imratecha is your Torah, but it also refers to the circumcision, to the Brit Milah. Kemotze shalal ra. That I can find major spoils from this. As if someone found major spoils. What are these spoils? So Rav Ginsburg explains a beautiful way to look at it, that the first thing that what we're telling a baby is you're not confined to the way you look at your body. You were born one way, and now you're becoming different. And now you will be able to strip out of this way of thinking and go into that way, etc., and to go throughout this world, to do ufaratzta, to expand to the world without being confined. And you will do this based on what you've learned here when you're 8 days old, that you're not confined. You're not confined to the basic way of thinking. It's something very, very deep and very beautiful that we have the ability to expand. Now, who wants to expand? The basic, a king of a kingdom, if he does not want to expand, he's not a real king. We can see it, unfortunately. This is just my observation, that the more that there's a president, for example, in the United States or other places, that feels that he's doing the right thing, that he's doing something well, the more that he feels that he can expand and be and go out to other places and send soldiers out. The more they feel that internally there are issues, the more they want to bring the army back and not expand. And this is something very, very interesting that we see. We know one of the famous statements that we know about the land of Israel is that it says Atida Eretz Israel, the land of Israel is going to litpashet b'kol ha'aratzot, to expand, as we said the word litpashet, to expand to all the countries. There is something about the good of Israel, the land of Israel, that is going to be expanded after it's developed properly here in Israel. It's going to expand to all the lands. The same thing as we said about Torah. The Torah, as we spoke about the fourth revolution last week, Torah expands to everyone. At the end of the day, the point of the land of Israel, the point of Torah, the point of the good of this world is to expand to all four corners, to everywhere. Ufaratzta. That when the Rebbe wanted to bless someone, he would say Ufaratzta. Expand. You have something good. Whenever someone speaks about, there's a lot of talk about whether we should spread Torah or maybe it's not nice. I would say, imagine you had checks of $1 million and you had a pile of them, as many as you can think of, and you're walking in the street. Wouldn't you try to push it to everyone you see? Or they would say, no, I don't want. What do you mean you don't want? I have $1 million here for you. You really want. If we would think of Torah the way we think of $1 million, we would have no problem explaining to someone that this is good for him, that he should take it. Even if he's saying, no, don't worry about it. I'm good. No, you're not good. You're going to be much better. Look what I have for you. Just an interesting way to look at it. But going back to what we're trying to say here, that in order to expand, you must first strip it out of the basic way of looking at it. That must happen. What is the saying? What is Moshe being told? He's being told, Shal na'alecha mal raglecha. The way Rabbi Simcha Bunim from Shischa, he said that if I could have it my way, this is a very interesting Torah that Rav Ginsburg brought from Rabbi Simcha Bunim. He said, if I could have it my way, I would have a beautiful home. I'm saying it in my words. I would have a beautiful home. I would have very nice couches. I would have nice food, meat, and wine and everything. And I would sit there and I would say Torah, just a little bit, not a lot. And then people would eat something. And if they're tired, they would sleep. And I would say more. I wouldn't be confined to the way people look at it. The way people see it is, if you want to learn Torah, you got to be poor and you gotta let go of everything else. Well, that is the beginning part, as we said. You have to strip out, but at the end of the day, shal na'alecha is like haser misgerotecha. Take out your confinements, everything that confines you, that puts you in a siege, that puts you in one place and does not allow you to expand. You have to get out of that. Again, it's a process. You have to do it carefully. Rav Ginsburg explains that someone not doing this carefully could really fall. If you're expanding, and we can see it in the high-tech world a lot lately. If again, this is my observation, if you look at the last 2-3 years in the high-tech world, the world gave a lot of money because of the COVID and everything that happened around it. The world put a lot of money for the expansion of high-tech stuff, of different softwares and different high-tech solutions. And when there was such a big expansion and so much money thrown into it, many of the companies could not handle it and are starting to fall now. Again, when an expansion happens without first being stripped out of the way you're doing, if you take a normal person and you let him win the lottery, we know the researchers say that, I forgot the percentage, 80-90% of them file bankruptcy within 5 years or less. People are not able to handle the expansion. In order to handle the expansion, what does God say? Stop. Al tikra v'lo. Do not come here. Lo, stop. Shal na'alecha. You have to you have to strip out your ways of thinking, your confinement, the things that put you in the siege, the way you look at things, because the place that you're standing on is Admat Kodesh. You can turn the ground. The ground is the lowest point of this world. You can turn the Adamah, the ground, into Kodesh, into being holy. But that is a very, very high level. And to get there, you have to go through a process. There's two words that go together, or, which is light, and or, which is skin. The shoes are usually made out of ore, of skin. We know that in Tisha B'Av and other special days that you cannot wear leather or shoes with leather, because it's something that you have to connect directly to the ground, basically, or you have to wear cheaper shoes. Before the first Adam sinned, he had a special clothing, the secret of Hashmal, which is normally translated as electric, but he had special light that was his clothing. Again, clothing of a person is like his confinements, the way he presents himself. So the special clothing that the Adam had was special light, the special light. And when he failed, when he ate from the tree, he went down a step from being or light to leather clothing, which is a step down. What do we want? We want to go back to being light. The whole idea of Hasidut is ufaratzta, to expand Torah in order to go back to being able to connect to the light, to have light. Now, what is this expansion? If you remember the fire that came on the snare in the bush was fire that did not eat it. It's a special way, it's a special energy. It's called there's a lot of research, like New Age research that's still being done about dark energy. I think in around 2011, there was a Nobel Prize to guys who figured it out. But there's a special energy that expands and doesn't kill things. That the fire is on there, is on the bush, but it's not eating the bush. That special energy, the ability to expand with that energy, is an example of Torah. And Torah is going to be given in the same place. Torah is something that is fire, but it's fire that expands and not fire that burns and eats. Now, we know that just like by the bush, God said to Moshe to take your shoes off. He said there was an angel sent to Joshua many years later, and he told him, you also take your shoes off. But there's a difference. That in the time, God told Moshe to take Naalecha, both your shoes, in plural. But by Joshua, it says Naalech, your one shoe. What is the difference? Because Moshe is like the sun. All around it gives light. And Joshua was more referred to like the moon, where one side is lit and the other is dark. So Moshe had to be completely stripped out of his physical. Mefarshim commentators explain that is when he was commanded not to be with a woman anymore, to be completely connected to Hashem and not to be married anymore. I mean, he was still married, but he wasn't with his wife. Where Yoshua was only commanded to take out one type of shoes, and he was still able to be married. Now, we know that afterwards it says by Yoshua, it says, Vayas Yoshua Ken, that Yoshua did this. So, is this a higher level? I mean, in a sense, you can say it's a higher level. The Torah says that Yoshua did what he was told. We know that Moshe was arguing back then. But what Rav Ginsburg explains is that the higher level is that there's no option not to do differently. The way Moshe Rabbeinu was so connected to Hashem after the prophecy by the bush, by the snare, that it was obvious that he's going to do what he was told. It was all around, out of his physical being, and all around connected to Hashem. And he was able to have Itpashtuta de Moshe b'chol dor. Every generation has connection, has a Moshe Rabbeinu, has someone that has Moshe Rabbeinu in it. The expansion of Moshe is in every generation. He saw from his time everywhere. Bechol beiti ne'emanu. He's everywhere. Yoshua is more confined, and therefore he was still able to be married. Now, we know that at the end of the day, what we're looking for is we're looking for Mashiach, and Mashiach will be able to expand but still stay married. That is the special difference between the first Redeemer, Goel Rishon, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Goel Acharon, Mashiach. The Mashiach is going to be able to be married. It's not going to restrict him, confine him, but rather it's going to allow him to expand. He's going to be able to expand together with the world. The reason why Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to come to the land of Israel is because he wanted the land of Israel to expand. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu does. He helps the land expand, or the land, or the Torah, or everything expand. But it wasn't the right time. But now, Be'ezrat Hashem, very soon, Mashiach is going to be able to expand together with being married. It's not going to confine him. And therefore, the whole world will be able to handle this higher level of expansion. Confined by time. So we'll see if there's any questions. And if not, maybe we'll say one more thing. Okay, so there's a question. והפשיט אהרון בגדיו, ובשתם את אלעזר בנו, ואהרון יוסף מת שם. Interesting question. I'm not sure I understand. The question is, why did Sharon? Which Sharon? Oh, maybe you meant Aaron. So it's an interesting question. What she's asking is, we know that when Aaron, the brother of Moshe, passed away, he stripped out of his clothing and they gave it to Elazar. So maybe, and again, I do think this could be very much connected. The way for Aaron to expand to the next generation was through stripping out of his current clothing, and therefore being able to expand and give these clothing on, that every Kohen Gadol is like is referred to just like Aaron Kohen Gadol. So it's a very nice way of looking at it, that he had to strip out of his clothing in order to expand on to the next generation. So yes, it sounds to me like it's connected. If there's any other questions? Okay, we have a few more minutes, and I see that there are no special questions. So we'll say the ending story of the wonders that Rav Ginsburg spoke about this. It's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had a student who was always very close. He was a very holy student. And every time the Baal Shem Tov would bring him closer and talk to him in private and do all these things to show that he's very close to this student. One time when he came, the Baal Shem Tov was not willing to have him even come close. Just stay away. And he was very shocked by this. And he went to Rabbi Gershom Mikito and asked him, why is this? So he asked the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov said that I see on him a very terrible sin of being with a married woman. And Reb Gershon went to him and he says, there's no way. For 16 years, I was so separated from physical that even I was not with my wife for 16 years. There's no way. So Reb Gershon went back to the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, I'll look into it in the right time. And it was Erev Shabbos, and the Baal Shem Tov went up to Shamayim, and he sees that when he comes to the place in Shamayim for the Rambam, he sees that in that place he sees the problem. And why is that? It turns out that the Rambam says the psak that if someone is not willing to be with his wife, it's as if she's asur from him, and he cannot enjoy anything of hers. And what this guy did was, one time he needed some money, so he took her jewelry and he sold them. Well, he didn't sell them, but he took loans based on mortgaging out her jewelry in order to do tzedakah or whatever he needed to do, and he paid it back. But according to Rambam, since he was not with her, it was considered as if he took something that wasn't his. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted to argue this, and he couldn't argue with the Rambam alone. So the story says that he took with him the Rif and the Rosh, and they argued with the Rambam. And when they won the argument, this halacha of not being able to enjoy things of your wife if you were not with her was completely erased from the Rambam, even though this is hundreds of years later. So very, very special story. But to connect to what we're saying here, the idea that we can learn from this, that at the end of the day, the goal is not to be disconnected, but the goal is that if you're doing disconnection, if you're stripping out of your physical, it's in order to later on bring it into the world in a better way. So what the Baal Shem Tov was arguing with the Rambam for is for this to be able to be mutter, that he's able at the end of the day to bring back the situation and to do good. And this a little bit refers to what we were saying, that Mashiach will be married and will be able to do everything together with his wife, unlike the way it was with Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was not able to have any physical connections, so except for connection with Hashem. So there's a lot to learn from. There's a beautiful, beautiful things, and we should all be able to break out of the different things that confine us, whether it's our way of thinking or people's way of thinking that we connect to, and be able to connect to the right way of thinking. As we said, we started saying that God said the 10 Commandments, le'emor, in order to be connected to this world and to change the way we think of this world. So Shavua Tov, everybody. Everyone should, Bezrat Hashem, this week be very successful, and Kemotzeh Shalal Rav, be able to take out a lot of wealth in this world from various different things by order to expand with Torah.